Hey, what's up, Internet? So, this video came out recently of SXSW, and they did an interview with Elon Musk. I'm going to go over some highlights. Let's do this. Okay, first question of the entire interview. Mars, how can we help?
I think right now that the biggest thing that would be helpful is just general support and encouragement and goodwill.
So maybe we can call the thrift shop and see if they have any rocket engine donations recently. I don't know, let's give him a call. On the subject of how he divides up his time, a pretty cool point was mentioned that I think is an all-around good advice. So he spends about 80 to 90% of his time at SpaceX on engineering and not the management of the business. And he said this.
Yeah, I think in order to make the right decisions, you have to understand something. And if you don't understand something at a detailed level, you cannot make a good decision.
It's so true. Do you ever listen to people talk about a subject that they don't know the details about, and then they're making decisions on it, and it's called politics. Oh gosh, let's steer the other direction. How can you make rocket decisions without knowing about rockets? He prefers engineering. I don't blame him. You know what though? Screw that. I blame you. Blame. Oh, gosh. Right after that point, though, that he made, he also spoke on the appreciation that he has for the team at SpaceX of people. So that's cool. Go team. Great advice in reality at the 26-minute mark here.
You know, wishful thinking for sure is a source of many problems in many walks of life. Business or personal wishful thinking causes a lot of trouble. You really have to ask, whether something is true or not. That doesn't make sense, and if it ever feels like too easy, it probably is.
The Boring Company was mentioned after that too. So yeah, you should probably watch the whole video. Link is in the description below.
So thank you for anyone who's bought our flamethrower. You will not be sorry, or maybe you will. It won't be boring.
Cheesy. Thank you for the cheese. This was cool too, talking about tweets and how much time he takes.
I mean, the Boring Company, to be clear, it's like literally 2% of my time. It's probably 20% of my tweets. But tweets do not correlate to actual time spent.
Now, the interview ended up going towards AI, and he started saying super offensive, preposterous things like...
The biggest issue I see with so-called AI experts is that they think they know more than they do. And they think they're smarter than they actually are. In general, we are all much smarter than we think we are, but much less smart, dumber than we think we are.
Perhaps his hiccup or stutter or whatever that was is a perfect example of exactly what he was saying. Yes. Back again, though, to that piece of advice earlier.
Plague smart people. They just can't, they define themselves by their intelligence, and they don't like the idea that a machine could be way smarter than them, so they discount the idea, which is fundamentally flawed. That's the wishful thinking situation.
He ended up going back into detail about how a computer started getting smarter at games by playing itself. And then it got better than playing humans and several humans at the same time. And self-driving was mentioned too. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. His main point about AI and its existence, it's kind of important.
So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face.
Also, the more dangerous than nukes remark was made that you probably have seen in the news if you watch news or read it, I guess. Okay, I kind of felt I would be doing a disservice if I left this highlight out. And so, yes, the most important thing we could possibly do sounds important.
If humanity collectively decides that creating digital superintelligence is the right move, then we should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. This is the most important thing that we could possibly do.
Reasoning from Mars and a moon base coming up. This is going to take about 1 minute. Neato thinking stuff, man.
There's likely to be, we don't know, but there's likely to be another dark ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be at some point. I'm not predicting that we're about to enter dark ages, but that there's some probability that we will, particularly if there's a third world war. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back, and perhaps shorten the length of the dark ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base, ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III.
Then he wanted to make it clear he wasn't making any predictions. Just talk of possibilities. Yes. I did not notice a crystal ball in his hand, so I wasn't assuming. Mention of Asimov's zeroth law? Huh? I gotta Google that.
Asimov's zeroth law. You're going to take the set of actions most likely to support humanity into the future.
Speaking of the cost of CO2, it's always good to listen to. And I agree with his view on this. However, many don't, but listen to this.
Essentially, anything that produces carbon, it puts carbon into the atmosphere, which includes rockets, by the way. So I'm not excluding rockets from this. There has to be a price. And that you can start off with a low price, but then that price, and then depending upon whether that price has any effect on the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, you can adjust that price up or down. But in the absence of a price, we sort of pretend that digging trillions of tons of fossil fuels from deep under the earth and putting it into the atmosphere, we're pretending that has no probability of a bad outcome. And the entire scientific community is saying, obviously, it's going to have a bad outcome. Obviously, you're changing the chemical constituency of the atmosphere.
He goes on to talk where like we are today with carbon in the atmosphere, and it's one of the most realistic things I've heard anyone say outside of my science classes back in high school. You should watch the entire thing, of course, but here's the good parts.
I actually think we can manage with the current carbon level, or even a little bit higher. It's and this is going to sound like I'm backtracking, but there's actually an argument that more carbon in the atmosphere is actually good, but up to a point. So we might actually arguably have been a little carbon starved. If you go back 200 years ago and say, okay, well, a few hundred years ago, we had 280, 290 parts per million of carbon. We're probably a little carbon starved. Now we're about 400, just past 400 mark. I think somewhere in the 400s, probably okay. We don't have to worry about sequestering carbon or anything like that. But now if this momentum keeps going and we start going up to 600, 800, 1,000, 1,500, that's where things get really squirrely. And the sheer momentum of the world's energy infrastructure is leading us in that direction. So it's just very important that the public and the governments push to ensure that the correct price of carbon is paid.
Back to AI. Really cool concept of a definition for AI.
You have to be careful about this, because if you say maximize happiness, and the AI concludes that happiness is a function of dopamine and serotonin, so it captures all humans and injects your brain with large amounts of dopamine and serotonin. Like, okay, it's not what we meant.
It sounds pretty good, though.
Oh, you'll love it. Well, I like the definition of the AI should try to maximize the freedom of action of humanity. Maximize the freedom of action. Maximize freedom, essentially.
And this is a teaser for you just to watch, so you could go watch the whole video.
And talking about another project that you're working on that our audience wants to know a little bit more about, Starlink.
Oh.
Can you tell us anything?
Do you mean Skynet?
Listen to this question.
What kind of government do you envision for the first Martian colony?
Oh my. He has spoken on this subject before quite a bit, but I think it's a cool highlight, and we don't see this really that often that regarding ideas for the government.
Otherwise, you just get laws just accumulate over time, and it's sort of like Gulliver, where you just get trapped by all these tiny strings and you can't move. You get hardening of the arteries of civilization with rules and rules and rules and rules. So it should be just easier to get rid of a rule than to put one in.
Eventually, his brother Kimball came on, and they discussed their history about like talking about world issues and maybe solving them. And he made a really interesting point about highlighting the difference of education and actually doing something outside of education.
I wasn't sure. There's one of those things where you could work in it for a long time and discover that there's actually no good solution. You could publish a paper and you get a PhD and all that, but it would be academic in its value.
And this is a funny part that happened regarding selling software or something.
We built this incredible technology, but it wasn't being used by the customers in the right way. It was a bit like building, F-22 fighter jets, and then you sell them to people, and they roll them down the hill at each other. And you're like, that's really not the way to use it. Okay.
Okay, it started wrapping up. He's talked about AC Propulsion Laboratories and the T0. And I don't know if you guys know about AC Propulsion Laboratories, but I used to be obsessed with them. And yeah, they have this kit, and Elon talked about that sort of. Tom Hanks has a video where he got one of these Scions that were converted. The AC Propulsion Laboratories used to offer. Anyway, you got to hear Elon talk about that critically, and his point was perfect.
But the problem is, like, the electric Scion would cost $70,000, or you could build a sports car for $100,000. Okay, but like nobody's going to buy the electric Scion, but people might buy the electric sports car.
Okay, guys, this is the final tease.
Playing and singing and dancing this song since we were kids, and so we're going to do that on stage. And if you guys can sing along, we'll do the first verse, and then you guys can sing along on the second verse.
Okay. This is going to be real bad.
Guys, in the description below, or in the eye in the corner of the screen, you can watch the entire interview, and I encourage you to do so. And if you think it might be a little long, at an hour and 11 minutes, you can just crank up the speed, turn it up to like 1.25, 1.5, or 2 times speed. Yeah, worth a full watch. Anyway, hope that helped. See you later, Internet.
I think whenever you think you can have your cake and eat it too, that's something you're probably wrong.